The Galactic Station's dining hall buzzed with the usual cacophony of 100 species conducting business, trading gossip, and sharing meals. Steam rose from exotic dishes while translators hummed, converting growls into clicks, chirps into harmonious tones. But tonight one sound cut through it all, the piercing wail of a distressed dragonling. Emperor Zephyrus Malthak, supreme ruler of the draconian hegemony, sat rigid in his reinforced chair, his massive wings folded tight against his obsidian scales. His golden eyes darted nervously between his crying offspring and the stares of other patrons. The young dragonling, barely 3 cycles old, had been inconsolable for the past hour. "Hush, little one," Zephyrus rumbled in the ancient draconian tongue, his voice like distant thunder. "You shame our bloodline with such displays." But his son Pirion only cried harder, his small wings fluttering in distress. The Emperor's tail lashed with barely contained frustration. In the draconian hegemony, emotions were weakness, and weakness was death. Yet here he was, powerless against his own child's tears. From across the dining hall, Adam Chen watched the scene unfold as he cleared tables. The young human had worked on Galactic Station Omega-7 for 2 years, saving credits to fund his xenobiology research. He'd learned to read the body language of dozens of species, and right now, the mighty Dragon Emperor looked utterly lost. "Poor guy," Adam muttered to his co-worker Maheen as she balanced a tray of Centaurian delicacies. "Even emperors can't figure out crying kids." Maheen Rashid paused, her dark eyes softening as she watched the dragonling's distress. The human waitress had grown up as the eldest of 7 siblings back on Earth Colony Prime. She knew that sound, pure exhaustion and overstimulation. "The little one's overwhelmed," she said quietly. "Look at all these lights, sounds, smells. Draconian young have hypersensitive nervous systems." Adam raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that?" "I read xenopediatrics texts in my spare time," Maheen replied with a slight smile. "Dream of opening an interspecies daycare someday." The dragonling's cries reached a new pitch, causing several patrons to cover their auditory organs. Emperor Zephyrus's scales darkened with embarrassment, a biological response that made his mortification visible to everyone present. Without hesitation, Maheen set down her tray and walked toward the imperial table. Adam's eyes widened. "Maheen, what are you—" But she was already approaching the towering dragon, her movement slow and non-threatening. The Emperor's head snapped up, golden eyes blazing with warning. In his species' culture, approaching the young of a dragon without permission was a death sentence. "Your Imperial Majesty," Maheen said, performing a respectful bow that she'd learned from the station's cultural database. "Forgive my intrusion. I couldn't help but notice your little prince seems distressed." Zephyrus studied her with predatory intensity. Humans were barely recognized as sentient by most of the galaxy, clever primates who'd stumbled into space technology. "You dare approach draconian royalty, mammal?" "Only to help," Maheen replied calmly. "I have experience with distressed young ones." The dragonling's cries intensified, and something cracked in the Emperor's carefully maintained composure. You believe you can calm him when I cannot." "May I try, Your Majesty?" For a long moment, Zephyrus stared at this small human female who showed no fear in his presence. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "You have 1 minute before I consider this an insult." Maheen approached the crying dragonling slowly. Pirion was beautiful, scales that shifted from deep purple to silver, tiny horns just beginning to emerge, and eyes like molten gold. But he was clearly overwhelmed, his small chest heaving with each wail. Instead of trying to touch him, Maheen simply sat in the empty chair across from him and began to sing. Her voice was soft, melodic, carrying a gentle rhythm that seemed to wrap around the harsh edges of the dining hall's chaos. The song had no words any translator could parse. It was pure emotion, a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her, passed down through generations of human mothers. It spoke of safety, of love unconditional and eternal, of gentle hands and warm embraces. The effect was immediate. Pirion's cries began to soften, his breathing slowing as he focused on this new, soothing sound. Around the dining hall, conversations gradually ceased as other species stopped to listen. Even the Emperor found himself leaning forward, drawn by something in the human's voice that bypassed logic and spoke directly to some primal understanding. Maheen's song continued, weaving through melodies that seemed to echo the heartbeat of life itself. Adam watched in amazement as the dragonling's distress melted away. replaced by wonder. Pyrion's golden eyes fixed on Maheen, and for the first time that evening he was completely still. When the song ended, the dining hall remained silent for several heartbeats. Then Pyrion made a small content chirp, the draconian equivalent of a giggle. Emperor Zephyrus stared at Maheen with something approaching awe. In 3,000 years of life, through countless wars and negotiations, he had never witnessed such magic. Not the dramatic sorcery of his species' ancient legends, but something subtler and perhaps more powerful. How? He asked simply. Maheen smiled, gently extending her hand toward Pyrion, who sniffed it curiously with his small forked tongue. Every species young respond to genuine care, Your Majesty. Sometimes they just need to know they're safe and loved. But you are human. Prey. He should fear you. Maybe, Maheen said, as Pyrion allowed her to gently stroke his head, his small rumble of contentment vibrating through the air. But I think young ones see the heart before they see the species. Zephyrus watched his son, the heir to an empire spanning 7 star systems, cuddle trustingly against this human waitress. Something fundamental shifted in his understanding of the galaxy. You said you read xenopediatrics, he said slowly. You study the care of alien young. It's a hobby. I hope to work with interspecies families someday. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, his massive form still as stone. Then, the hegemony has many worlds, many young ones struggling to adapt as we expand into new territories. Would you consider sharing your knowledge? Maheen looked up from where Pyrion had curled up in her lap, his tiny body finally relaxed. Your Majesty, I am offering you a position, human. Royal advisor for young ones. The pay would be substantial. Adam nearly dropped the glasses he'd been collecting. Around the dining hall, other patrons stared in shock. A human, a species barely acknowledged by galactic society, being offered a position in the draconian imperial court. Maheen considered this, gently stroking Pyrion's scales as he dozed. I'd need to learn more about draconian culture, and I'd want to establish protocols that respect both traditional values and modern understanding of child development. Agreed. Zephyrus's voice held wonder. You transformed my son's distress into peace with nothing but your voice. If this is what humans can accomplish... He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. For the first time, a member of the galactic elite was seeing humanity not as clever animals, but as beings with their own unique gifts to offer the cosmos. As news of the evening spread throughout the station, other species began to take notice. Humans, it seemed, possessed something remarkable, an intuitive understanding of care and compassion that transcended species barriers. Within days, requests began pouring in from across the galaxy. The age of humanity's recognition had begun not through conquest or technology, but through one waitress's gentle song to a crying child. And in his dreams that night, Emperor Zephyrus found himself humming a simple human lullaby, finally understanding that true strength sometimes came wrapped in the gentlest of packages.